Start with awareness. Observe your triggers before they control you. This is the first step in training your mind to remain calm in any situation. You cannot master what you don't first notice. Most people live on autopilot, completely unaware of the patterns that dominate their emotions and decisions. They move from one moment to the next, reacting out of habit, without ever stopping to ask, "Why am I feeling this way?" Or, "What just triggered that reaction in me?" But awareness is where transformation begins. Before you can change how you respond, you must be able to identify what is setting you off in the first place. Think of awareness as turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly you can see the obstacles that have always been there but were hidden. You begin to notice how a certain tone of voice makes your chest tighten. You begin to see how specific phrases or actions by others instantly put you on edge. You realize that the anxiety you feel isn't random. It's tied to very specific situations, memories, or unmet needs. That clarity alone doesn't change the reaction, but it gives you the option to choose something different. Awareness is the pause before the storm, the breath before the words, the gap between stimulus and response. In that gap lies your freedom. Without awareness, your triggers become chains. They pull you into arguments, they rob you of peace, and they lead you into guilt-ridden decisions. You say things you didn't mean, you take things personally, you spiral into thoughts that only make things worse. But with awareness, you break that cycle. You start to catch yourself in the moment. You hear the rise in your voice, and you ask why. You feel the tension in your body, and instead of letting it take over, you observe it. You don't judge it, you just watch. And in watching, you weaken its control over you. This is not a skill that comes naturally or quickly. It takes daily practice. You must be curious about yourself, not just critical. Most people don't want to look inward because they're afraid of what they'll find. But real strength comes from facing your inner world with honesty and courage. Ask yourself, what situations consistently cause me to lose my calm? What do these moments have in common? What story am I telling myself in those situations? Awareness is about pattern recognition. When you start to see the patterns, you gain insight into your emotional blueprint. You begin to understand not just what you react to, but why. For example, if you find yourself getting angry whenever someone questions your ideas, it might not be about the person or the idea. It might be about an old fear of not being good enough, of being dismissed or disrespected. Once you become aware of that root, you can start healing it. You can speak to yourself differently. You can prepare your mind to respond with confidence instead of defensiveness. You can take back control from the past and start creating a different future. This is the foundation of emotional intelligence. It's not about suppressing your emotions or pretending you don't have triggers. It's about becoming so familiar with them that they no longer have the power to dictate your behavior. You learn to sit with discomfort without needing to fix it immediately. You learn to hold space for your emotions without letting them speak on your behalf. This level of awareness builds resilience. It builds calm. And the beautiful part is, the more you observe your own triggers, the more compassionate you become with others. You begin to recognize that they too are reacting from their own pain, their own insecurities, their own fears. You stop taking everything so personally because you understand that most people are projecting their own unhealed wounds. This doesn't make their behavior acceptable, but it helps you respond with wisdom instead of war. It helps you keep your peace in situations where most would lose it. Awareness also teaches you responsibility. You stop blaming the world for your reactions. You stop saying, "They made me angry," or "They ruined my day." Instead, you begin to say, "That triggered something in me, and I'm going to explore why. This shift puts you in the driver's seat of your emotional life. No longer a victim of circumstance, you become a student of your own mind. And every time you choose to observe instead of react, you grow stronger. You become less fragile, more grounded, and more intentional with how you live, lead, and love. Control is an illusion. Influence begins with inner stillness. We spend so much of our lives trying to control everything around us. What people think, how situations unfold, how outcomes turn out. We want certainty, predictability, and results that match our expectations. But life is not built on control. It's built on unpredictability, chaos, and constant change. The problem arises when we try to manage that chaos with force instead of clarity. When we try to dominate our external world without first understanding our internal one, we fail. The truth is, the only real power we have is influence. And influence is only possible when we start from a place of inner stillness. Inner stillness is not passivity. It is not weakness or inaction. It is the calm center that allows us to observe, reflect, and respond with intention rather than panic. Most people equate stillness with doing nothing. But stillness is highly active. It's the choice to stay mentally composed when your environment is anything but. It's the strength to stay grounded when emotions try to pull you in every direction. From this stillness, your words carry more weight. Your decisions have more clarity. Your actions leave a deeper impact. People around you begin to notice, not because you're loud, but because your presence feels centered. When you let go of control, you open the door to clarity. You stop wasting energy on things that are beyond your reach. Other people's opinions, unexpected changes, uncontrollable events. And you begin to redirect that energy inward. You begin to influence your reactions, your mindset, your presence. That's where true power lives. Not in forcing things to bend to your will, but in becoming the kind of person who remains steady regardless of the storm. That steadiness becomes your influence. It shifts conversations, diffuses tension, and creates space for real connection and leadership. You cannot influence others when you are emotionally reactive. You cannot lead anyone effectively if you are controlled by fear, anger, or anxiety. Influence begins when your thoughts are clear, when your emotions are steady, and when your values are louder than your impulses. Stillness allows you to listen without judgment. It allows you to pause before speaking. It gives you space to assess the situation, not from ego, but from purpose. From this posture, you become someone others trust, not because you control everything, but because you don't need to. Letting go of control doesn't mean giving up. It means accepting what is, so you can deal with it intelligently. It means choosing to influence what you can, your attitude, your effort, your response, rather than obsessing over things that refuse to obey your expectations. The irony is, the less you try to control others, the more influence you actually gain. People naturally resist manipulation, but they're drawn to authenticity. They're drawn to those who are calm, clear, and consistent. That kind of influence can't be faked. It comes from someone who has built it through quiet self-discipline. Inner stillness must be cultivated. It's not something you stumble into. It's built through practices like reflection, solitude, meditation, journaling, and deep breathing. It's built when you choose to pause during conflict instead of reacting. It's strengthened every time you notice the urge to control and instead choose to trust. Trust in your preparation. Trust in your resilience. Trust in your ability to respond to whatever comes. This kind of trust transforms you from someone trying to hold everything together into someone who becomes the anchor for others. When your mind is still, you stop seeking external validation to feel secure. You stop needing to win every argument or prove your worth. You become confident in silence, powerful in restraint, wise in observation. You no longer need to dominate a room to own it. Your very presence becomes a signal to others that they're in the company of someone who isn't easily shaken. That's not control, that's influence. And it starts from the inside. The more you practice inner stillness, the less attached you become to specific outcomes. You begin to see that most of life isn't about forcing your will, but aligning yourself with what matters most and responding accordingly. From this space, you influence people not by commanding them, but by inspiring them. Not by demanding attention, but by earning respect. The influence that comes from inner stillness is long-lasting because it's not built on fear or control. It's built on presence, intention, and quiet strength. Clarity comes from calm. Never make decisions in chaos. When the mind is in a state of panic, overwhelmed with fear, stress, or anger, it loses its ability to think clearly. Emotions cloud judgment, distort perception, and amplify worst-case scenarios. In those moments, the decisions we make are often reactions, not responses. They are driven by urgency rather than understanding. They serve the moment, but rarely serve the long term. To make good decisions, decisions that are aligned with our values, our goals, and our integrity, we need mental clarity. And clarity can only emerge when the mind is calm. Calmness doesn't mean indifference. It means composure. It means keeping your mind quiet enough to hear your own thoughts amidst the noise of external pressure and internal doubt. When you're calm, you can assess a situation from multiple angles. You can separate fact from emotion. You can step back and ask, what is the wisest next move, rather than, how do I make this pain stop? That shift in thinking can change the entire trajectory of your life, because impulsive decisions often lead to regret, while calm, considered decisions often lead to growth. In moments of chaos, everything feels urgent. The pressure to act is intense, but calmness gives you the space to slow things down, to breathe, to wait. You don't need to rush into a decision just because the world is moving fast around you. Speed isn't wisdom. Noise isn't truth. Just because others are panicking doesn't mean you have to. When you maintain your inner calm, you create space between stimulus and response. That space is where clarity lives. It's where the fog begins to lift. It's where your best thinking happens. This is why the most effective leaders are not those who always have the answers, but those who remain composed in uncertainty. Their calmness creates confidence in others. It allows their teams, families, or communities to settle. And from that settled space, better decisions are made. A calm mind isn't reactive, it's intentional. It doesn't rush to judgment, it doesn't collapse under pressure, it observes, it reflects. I had confidence of someone who knows that rash decisions create more damage than delay. Even when things are falling apart around you, you still get to choose how you show up. You still get to decide whether you'll be ruled by chaos or guided by clarity. People will look to you in those moments, not because you have the perfect answer, but because your presence brings stability. Your calmness reminds them that not all is lost, that there is still a way forward, and that panic doesn't have to dictate the outcome. In fact, it never should. A calm mind sees opportunity, where a chaotic mind only sees obstacles. A calm mind listens, while a chaotic one talks over everything. A calm mind leads with vision, while a chaotic one follows emotion. That's why clarity is a product of calm, not speed, not volume, not urgency. And when you develop the discipline to stay calm, you give yourself the gift of seeing things as they are, not as your fear paints them, not as your ego distorts them, but as they truly are. And from that space, the right path begins to reveal itself. Breathing is your reset button. Use it before reacting. In the case, your body slows down, your heart rate begins to settle, your mind clears just enough to allow space between the event and your reaction. In that space lies your freedom to choose a different response. One that is rooted in awareness, not instinct. When you're angry, your breathing changes. When you're anxious, it becomes shallow. When you're afraid, it becomes fast and uneven. These shifts in breath aren't just symptoms, they are signals. And once you begin to recognize them, you realize that breath is not just a reaction to how you feel, it's also a way to change how you feel. When you deliberately slow down your breathing, you send a message to your nervous system: we are safe. This is powerful, because most of the time, it's not the situation that is dangerous. It's the story we're telling ourselves about the situation that creates panic, stress, or rage. By taking control of your breath, even for just a few seconds, you regain control of the moment. You anchor yourself to the present. You disrupt the automatic emotional response that would have taken over. You bring yourself back into the driver's seat. This is not just theory, it's biological. Breathing deeply activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of you responsible for rest, repair, and calm. It reduces the production of cortisol, the stress hormone, and increases your capacity to think clearly. That's not soft, that's science. And it gives you a powerful edge when everything around you is demanding a reaction. Most arguments escalate not because of what was said, but because no one paused to breathe before responding. Most regrets are born from moments where we spoke or acted without taking a breath to check in with ourselves. Breath is like a pause button that life has built into your biology. It's always available, always ready to help you slow down, reflect, and reframe. But you have to choose it, you have to practice it. The more you do, the more natural it becomes. You start to build a habit of breathing first and reacting second. That shift alone can change your relationships, your leadership, your inner peace. Breathing also connects you to your body in a world that is constantly trying to pull your attention outward. When you return to your breath, you return to yourself. You step out of the swirl of emotion and thought, and you root yourself in something real, something now. You realize that no matter what chaos is happening around you, you still have a center. You still have a place to come back to. And from that center, you can choose your words more carefully, your actions more wisely, your mindset more intentionally. This isn't about taking 5 minutes to meditate before every decision. Sometimes all you need is one deep breath. One moment of pause to ask yourself, what do I really want to say? What outcome? That's the power of breath. It creates a bridge between your emotional self and your rational self. It reminds you that you are not just a slave to impulse, that you can interrupt the cycle and redirect it. Even in high-stakes environments, boardrooms, hospitals, battlefields, people who perform under pressure have learned to regulate their breathing, not because it's spiritual, but because it works. It keeps their minds sharp, their reactions measured, and their presence calm. That's the kind of person others trust, not the one who yells the loudest, but the one who breathes, listens, and acts with purpose. Calm spreads. Just like panic is contagious, so is composure. And breath is how you start that chain reaction. It's a practice you can start anytime, anywhere. While waiting in traffic, in the middle of an argument, just before sending that text or email. When you feel the wave of emotion building, don't suppress it. Breathe through it. Acknowledge it. Let it rise, and then let your breath guide you back down. It doesn't mean the emotion disappears, but it no longer owns you. You become the observer, not the reactor. You become the person who stays steady while others lose control. All because you chose to breathe first. The strongest minds practice silence, not noise. In a world addicted to noise, constant opinions, and endless reactions, silence has become rare and therefore powerful. Most people associate strength with loudness, with assertiveness, with taking up space. But real strength doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to prove itself. The strongest individuals are those who know when to speak and when to remain silent, when to engage and when to observe. Silence isn't emptiness, it's presence. It's awareness. It's the ability to hold space without filling it unnecessarily. And in moments of pressure, that kind of control becomes a form of leadership. And by mastering that part, you become stronger. Because if your peace depends on the last word, it's not peace, it's insecurity. Silence breaks that dependency. It teaches you how to be at peace without external validation. Practicing silence is not about avoiding conflict or staying passive. It's about choosing your responses with intention. It's about understanding that not every situation requires your input, and not every challenge needs your defense. When you're silent, you observe more. You begin to see the patterns of behavior in others. You hear not just what's being said, but what's being avoided. You start to recognize when people are projecting their own insecurities onto you, and instead of reacting, you stay grounded. You hold the frame. That's real strength. Silence also allows you to listen deeply to others and to yourself. Most people listen to reply, not to understand. But those who practice silence listen with presence. They listen for the meaning beneath the words. They listen for the emotion behind the voice. And in doing so, they gather more information, build more trust, and create more connection. It's easy to talk. It's hard to truly listen. That's why those who do it well stand out. Their silence is not emptiness, it's power under control. In moments of confrontation, silence gives you an edge. It disarms people. It makes them pause. It forces them to sit with their own words. Often, when you don't react immediately, others begin to reflect, they begin to soften, they feel the weight of their own energy. That's the influence of silence. It's not aggressive, but it's effective. It slows things down. It shifts the dynamic. It invites a deeper level of awareness into the room. But silence is also a mirror. When you're silent, you can no longer run from your own thoughts. You start to hear the noise inside, the fears, the doubts, the unhealed wounds. And that's uncomfortable. That's why so many people avoid silence. They fill every moment with distraction, music, conversation, screens, because they don't want to face themselves. But the strongest minds turn toward that discomfort. They sit, they face what needs to be faced, and they do the work of understanding and healing. When you're quiet, you give yourself space to think, to reflect, to process. You're not rushed. You're not pulled by emotion. You gain perspective. You begin to understand the long-term consequences of your actions. You make choices from wisdom, not from impulse. You start to trust your inner voice more than the noise around you. That's when your confidence grows. Not the surface level confidence that needs applause, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. In relationships, silence builds depth. It shows that you're secure enough not to dominate every conversation. It creates space for others to express themselves. It teaches patience, humility, and emotional presence. In leadership, silence earns respect. People follow those who don't just speak well, but who think deeply, listen actively, and remain composed under pressure. The strongest minds are not those who never speak, but those who speak only when necessary and with intention. There is a kind of silence that comes from fear, from suppression, from avoidance. But that's not the silence of strength. The silence of strength is rooted in discipline, clarity, and confidence. It's a strategic tool, not a passive one. It's a choice to hold your energy, to keep your power close, to move through the world with presence instead of noise. When you practice silence, you sharpen your mind, deepen your awareness, and build unshakable calm. You become the kind of person who doesn't need to prove their worth, because it's already felt in your presence. Respond with intention, not impulse. That's real power. In the heat of the moment, it's easy to let emotion take over. Anger, fear, frustration, or ego can rise quickly and take the wheel before you've even realized it. That's the nature of impulse. It doesn't ask for permission. It acts before thought, it speaks before reflection, it moves before meaning. Most people live on that level. They are ruled by their moods, their reactions, and their triggers. They think they're making decisions, but really, they're just following the same unconscious patterns that have always dictated their lives. This is where true transformation begins, not by controlling the world, but by choosing to respond with clarity and purpose, even in chaos. When you respond with intention, you are no longer a victim of the moment. You become the author of your behavior. You step into the gap between stimulus and response, and decide who you want to be right now. That space, though it may feel small at first, is the most powerful place you can live from. In that space, you ask yourself questions that impulsive minds never ask. What matters most in this situation? What outcome am I actually aiming for? Will this response serve the bigger picture or just my short-term emotion? The difference between reaction and response is the difference between regret and wisdom. Reactions feel good for a second, but often leave behind damage. They satisfy ego, but they destroy connection. They solve nothing, but create more problems. A reaction says, "You hurt me, so I'll hurt you." A response says, "I'm hurt, but I choose to rise above it." That's not weakness, that's discipline. That's someone who refuses to give their power away to anyone else's behavior. It's someone who has trained their mind to stay in control when everything around them invites chaos. Responding with intention doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't let what you feel make decisions for you. It means you allow emotions to inform you, not control you. You might still feel angry, but you don't let anger choose your words. You might feel disappointed, but you don't let disappointment drive your actions. You pause, you reflect, you breathe, and then you move with clarity. That pause, that moment of stillness, separates those who are reactive from those who are wise. This mindset applies to every part of life. In relationships, it means you listen before you speak. You try to understand instead of defend. In leadership, it means you step back and see the whole board before making a move. In conflict, it means you respond with calm and control rather than escalation. And in personal growth, it means you stop repeating the same cycles because you're finally aware enough to interrupt them. That's the real work. Not just learning how to do more, but learning how to be more intentional with how you think, speak, and act. Intention is not about overthinking. It's about alignment. It's about making sure your response reflects who you are and what you stand for, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because that's when it counts the most. When your reputation, your relationships, your future can hinge on how you handle a single moment. One moment of composure can save you hours of conflict. One moment of self-restraint can preserve years of trust. And one decision to respond rather than react can change the entire direction of your life. But this kind of mastery doesn't come by accident. It requires training. It requires presence. It requires catching yourself when the impulse rises and saying, "Not this time." It's not about being perfect. It's about being conscious. You might still make mistakes, but you'll make fewer of them. You'll notice the shift in yourself. You'll feel more grounded, more in control, more peaceful. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. And that strength will start to show. People will notice that you don't get rattled easily, that you don't explode when others do, that you think before you speak and move with purpose. You become a calming force in rooms full of noise, a grounded presence when emotions are running high. And that's what real influence looks like. Not domination, not manipulation, but calm, intentional leadership that begins with self-mastery. Responding with intention is a daily practice. It's the quiet discipline of choosing who you want to be, over and over again, no matter what life throws at you.